I'm pleased to hear the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, has finally, after 6 months, decided it's no longer far right to want an inquiry. I think it was pretty disgraceful when he smeared me and other campaigners back in January, saying it was far right to want an inquiry. Forced to do this partly by the Casey report due out today, but also by the vote that we had scheduled in Parliament on Wednesday. And magically, all of a sudden, 48 hours before that vote, he suddenly changes his mind. And now, magically, all of a sudden, he's decided to have one after all. And by the way, of course, that's not because he believes in it or because he really wants to do it. He has been dragged here kicking and screaming.
Why did Keir Starmer reverse his stance on the grooming gangs inquiry after months of resistance? Was it survivor pressure, political panic, or something more? The timing of his announcement raises serious questions, with a Tory vote on a similar inquiry just days away. Is this genuine leadership or a desperate attempt to save face? Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video.
They covered it up for that reason, and those who did that should be held to account and, in my view, prosecuted for the offence of misconduct in public office. And those people who covered this up, senior police officers in some cases, local council leaders, leaders of social services. Well, I think first of all, Keir Starmer should apologise for smearing campaigners like me as far right for calling for this inquiry. He can start by apologising, and then we need to make sure those accountable, those responsible rather, for covering up these disgusting crimes, they should be prosecuted and imprisoned for deliberately covering up these disgusting crimes because they cared more about so-called race or community relations than they did about protecting vulnerable young girls.
For months, Keir Starmer stood firm in his refusal to support a national inquiry into grooming gangs, downplaying the need for such a measure despite widespread calls for justice. His public comments gave the impression of dismissiveness, as if addressing the issue in greater depth would do more harm than good. Critics were quick to latch on to what they saw as a troubling reluctance, especially given the mounting evidence from survivors of systemic failures to protect vulnerable young people. This initial stance not only failed to address the urgency of the matter, but also created a perception that his leadership lacked the courage to confront uncomfortable truths. Public outcry grew louder as survivors and advocacy groups voiced their frustrations. Many campaigners accused Starmer of ignoring the plight of those affected, while political commentators started questioning whether his hesitation was driven by political caution over public accountability. As if the situation wasn't already charged enough, the Conservatives fueled the fire by scheduling a vote on a similar inquiry, aimed squarely at pushing Starmer into action.
The thing that nobody's ever explained, Chris, for me, is why would anybody, whether they're Labour, Tory or Lib Dem or any other political persuasion, why would they think that by outing criminal behaviour that that's somehow bad for community relations?
Deliberately and actively decided to cover it up. Even the former chair, or the then chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party, actually warned a then Labour MP called Simon Danchuk, who was trying to raise this issue.
The timing underscored the increasingly stark divide between the Conservatives' approach and Starmer's tepid response, pressuring him to clarify his stance. But the more he resisted, the more his image became that of a leader unwilling to act under pressure, or at all. A significant factor behind Starmer's resistance seemed to stem from concerns about racial sensitivities. The fear of being accused of racial bias in addressing cases where offenders were disproportionately from specific ethnic groups stalled his party's willingness to commit to direct action. While many argued this concern highlighted a need for nuance and fairness, others labelled it as a convenient excuse for inaction. Even Baroness Louise Casey, whose expertise on institutional accountability carries significant weight, initially dismissed the idea of a grooming gang inquiry. Her position aligned closely with Starmer's, but that unity began to fracture as the need for transparency became harder to ignore. As survivor groups, political opponents, and even allies intensified their push, the cracks in Starmer's stance started to show. The build-up of public distrust created an unavoidable narrative of inaction, one that ultimately left him cornered. But what was it that forced his hand, leading to the sudden and dramatic shift in his position? Something significant must have changed. Keir Starmer's sudden announcement of a statutory inquiry into grooming gangs came just days before the Conservatives' scheduled vote on the same issue. The timing doesn't look accidental. For months, Starmer resisted these calls, so the announcement felt strategically placed, almost as if he was trying to snatch the political momentum. Critics have argued that this wasn't a moment of leadership. It was political maneuvering, driven by pressure rather than principle. External factors clearly played a crucial role in forcing his hand. Survivor groups and campaigners had taken their frustrations public, building pressure that became impossible to ignore. At the same time, Baroness Louise Casey's reversal added undeniable weight to the argument for an inquiry. Casey, who originally dismissed the need for such action, changed her position after reviewing harrowing evidence. Starmer himself cited her findings as pivotal in his decision, stating that her report compelled him to act. Without her reversal, his shift might never have happened. But let's not overlook the Conservatives' role here. They've been vocal about grooming gangs for years, even making a national inquiry part of their manifesto. Starmer's announcement, coming so close to their parliamentary vote, gave many the impression he was trying to preempt them, not out of conviction, but to avoid being outflanked. Tory MP Cami Bardin didn't hold back, accusing Starmer of being reactive, not a leader. She went further, calling this just another instance where Starmer changes direction only after political pressure mounts, pointing to his reversals on other key topics as proof. And then there's Nigel Farage. While he welcomed the move, Farage didn't mince words, warning that the inquiry must not become a whitewash. His skepticism reflects broader public doubt. Was this decision really about justice or just damage control? That skepticism grows when you hear Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phelps lambasting Starmer for initially dismissing campaigners only to adopt their demands later. Her blunt assessment: those in authority deliberately covered up systematic rape because they feared the truth. This government must do better. The question remains whether an inquiry born from political panic can deliver genuine accountability. Starmer's decision to back a national grooming gangs inquiry marks a significant shift, but the timing raises unavoidable questions. Was this move aimed at delivering long overdue justice, or was it simply a calculated response to political pressure? The success of this inquiry hinges on transparency and accountability at every level. Survivors, campaigners, and critics alike will scrutinize its ability to expose those who covered up systemic failures, whether in local councils, police forces, or social services, and to ensure real consequences follow. True leadership lies in pursuing the truth, not reactionary politics. Is this the moment Starmer proves himself, or just another misstep?